What made me go into the field of skincare technology was I was waiting for a solution for a specific issue that I was dealing with. I had, a specific, like I was trying to basically do hair removal, and I couldn't find anyone that was doing it for brown skin. And so I essentially decided after waiting about 6 or 7 years that I would just try to see if I could build it myself, and that I understood enough about physics and enough about technology to be able to oversee the work that was being done. So that's kind of where it all comes from a basic understanding of math and science and feeling comfortable in that space.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, May. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really, really excited to talk to Lisa today. Lisa is actually a practicing data scientist, and she's a subject matter expert with a nation-leading not-for-profit health plan called Kaiser Permanente. She's also a consumer psychology professional. She's currently completing a PhD at Columbia in metacognition and computational analysis. And her most recent beauty tech venture is founding the company Bell 51, and they provide cutting-edge technologies to provide beauty products and devices for Black and Brown communities. So welcome to the show, Lisa. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. There are so many facets to who you are. I would love to get audience into sort of hearing about your journey into actually first becoming a data scientist and what made you want to embark on that journey and career.
Yeah, so first of all, I started off studying engineering, biomedical engineering. I wanted to be a doctor for a really long time.
Wow.
And I kind of transitioned into biomedical engineering because the engineering side of it was really, really fascinating to me. Fast forward, graduating with that degree, it's more so about getting your master's and your PhD in that field. And at that point, it was such an emerging field that, a lot of the jobs that they were offering for biomedical engineering were research-based. So at that point, I was like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career. And I kind of moved into the first position that was offered to me, which was a client relationship manager role, which is like under sales. And it's very, it's very much related to Salesforce and understanding what clients need and building out the next products, and similar to like a product manager role, but also using client feedback to do so. Mm-hmm. And because I had that engineering background, I always wanted to like make things a little bit more solid. I wanted to solidify the ideas and get some science behind it, get some math behind it, and some proof before I just said like anecdotally, oh, my conversations were like this. So I started, going into surveys and, analysis as a result of that, and combining it with the things that I could pull out of the accounting books and, Salesforce. And so that kind of was like my introduction to data science before it became like a buzzword and became, a thing. And then I transitioned from that into actually studying data science and consumer decision-making and business analytics and things like that. And that was all because of the fact that I felt very comfortable in the technical field of engineering. So it was just like a good base for me to actually have that understanding, knowing that I've taken like a certain amount of courses that I could, at worst, kind of understand what was going on. So I did that. And then what made me go into the field of skincare technology was I was waiting for a solution for a specific issue that I was dealing with. I had, a specific, like I was trying to basically do hair removal, and I couldn't find anyone that was doing it for brown skin. And so I essentially decided after waiting about 6 or 7 years that I would just try to see if I could build it myself, and that I understood enough about physics and, enough about technology to be able to oversee the work that was being done. So that's kind of where it all comes from a basic understanding of math and science and feeling comfortable in that space.
So how does the industry you're in now use data science? Is it more analytics? Are you model building? What are you doing? What types of technologies are you using? And what is the insight or value that you're adding to the business day to day? Even just at a high level would be great to hear more.
Yeah, so the health industry specifically right now, obviously we're doing a lot of coronavirus
Right.
models and trying to predict what's going to happen next year. So we have that in the works. And then there's current metrics that are always being tracked in the healthcare field. So like the length of stay that people are in a hospital, or the rate of discharge, or how long it takes to discharge somebody. You kind of want to do a model where you're doing kind of these Markov models where you're trying to predict, well, if we have this many nurses in and these many nurses out, how many should we hire? There are temps and things like that. So it's a lot of different modeling techniques for these basic problems that kind of never end. There's always ways to improve upon them, always ways to tweak it. A recent project that I worked on was trying to reduce the stay of patients who had lung transplants. So trying to figure out, given, all of these variables that were given to us by several doctors, try to figure out which one of those were most responsible for people's lung transplants having a longer length of stay in the hospital and even potential mortality. So there's always projects that are coming up.
Wow, incredible. So you're in the middle of a PhD program at Columbia at the moment. What has been sort of the most interesting aspects of doing that, or what are the most fascinating discoveries you've made so far? And even just break down a little bit more about what the whole PhD program is about in and of itself.
Yeah. So the psychology program at Columbia is a psychology program. It's all encompassing. It covers neuroscience. It covers, any discipline of psychology you could think of, from the business side of it to the pure research of it. My study of metacognition is the study of people's decision making, meaning like the understanding of how they think about their thoughts. So we are taking it a level further. Instead of just people making decisions, we're trying to figure out how they're reasoning, how they're thinking about their reasoning, what weights there are to it. Specifically, my specific research is within judgments of learning, how people retain information, how people decide what's right, what's wrong, whether they're incorrect, whether they misunderstood, their confidence in these types of decisions, and then whether or not they're comprehending things. So in those decisions that people are making around that. So in those, there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of decision-making algorithms. Sometimes there's really simple models like linear models that are involved in that. A lot of multivariate models, covariates of all types, and including like trait analysis, whether people are humble individuals or, there are personality measures that are included, whether you're a growth mindset individual. We're looking at a host of different things and applying it to how people think about their thoughts.
So would you say, given that you are already a data scientist, this is a question that comes up a lot for people wanting to cross over into the field. Do you actually need a PhD to be a data scientist? Does it, help make you a better data scientist? Like, what would you say the value of completing a PhD program, already being a data scientist, actually is?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I don't think that you need a PhD to be a data scientist. I think that you just need to be a curious person. So the same way you don't need a PhD to be a software developer or a developer of any sort, if you are dedicated to the craft and if you are a very genuinely curious person and dedicated to what you're doing, you don't need to do that.
Right.
The field in general, maybe some of the requirements right now, I think because it's still an emerging field, even though it's been around for, a while now. I think that people are probably just going to slap on like, oh, you need a bachelor's or you need a master's or you need a PhD, but you don't need it to ask genuine questions and use a lot of the algorithms that are already built. Between R and Python, there's so many things that are built already. You don't even actually have to code the statistics behind it. You just have to understand what you're doing.
Right, absolutely. So as I said, your profile is very multidimensional, even if we just think in terms of you've got the machine learning background, the UX, and then got this very interesting sort of consumer behavioral analysis side of you as well. And I'm just curious, just from your standpoint, what are the sort of interesting trends or models that are being built that are sort of helping companies in terms of understanding consumer behavior and being able to predict it? Like, are there things that are really groundbreaking and interesting that are happening there, or are there things that we should really be concerned about? Because if they have this data and they're able to predict behavior, as you've said earlier, what can they potentially do with that? Is it something to be worried about?
Yeah, I mean, the whole, the man is watching everything you do, they are. I can't say necessarily with Kaiser that is that way, but I know that, when you say something, it pops up on your phone with an ad, and that's obviously an emerging field, and the better they get at that, the better they get at predicting what your behaviors are, and there's probably implications for that. I would probably need to do a lot more research in that area to figure out all of the negatives that come along with it, but there's probably a host of them. As far as emerging technology, what I've been seeing lately is like innovative ways that people are applying models that are traditionally used in one arena, then applying it to a different arena. So for example, control charts are usually used in like manufacturing or material science engineering, where they're looking for things that are a couple standard deviations away from the mean to keep track of whether or not something is within a normal distribution or not. And I've been noticing that people have been using that for example, we use that for coronavirus, for COVID tracking, to figure out what's going on by centers and by individuals. And then specifically within psychology, we're using a whole host of data. So we're using eye tracking, and it's becoming easy to do that with people's cameras. Like I can literally create something really simple in Qualtrics that will, or Gorilla, that will track people's eyes.
What does that data do? What do you use that data to do if you're tracking?
Yeah, so you want to know what people are drawn to. So maybe people are not answering honestly, right? So you want to get to what, or even their unconscious thoughts. And so you want to get to the truth of the matter. So that's why you would use eye tracking, right? And hormonal excretions or things like that, because people may say they're not stressed, but they're excreting cortisol or, and there's a lot of, so it's a way to get at what people don't even know that they're thinking. So those are some of the emerging behavioral and patterns, and just ways to operationalize metrics in ways that we never would have thought of before. It's not so straightforward all the time, but I think it's like we're getting more and more, creative with ways that data scientists are getting at operationalizing these things that we want.
Wow. And in these models that you're building, like, how are you sort of managing bias and things like that, especially in the times we're in now with everything that's going on socially? Like, there is this sort of hot topic and conversation around, people are building these models and they're making important decisions with these models. How are we taking account of bias in this? I think one of the sort of more serious issues is around the criminal justice system, for example. Like, if there are biases introduced in these models, even if you're trying not to introduce bias, you might still have features that correlate towards, framing someone to be a particular person that, is supposedly going to do X, Y, Z, etc. So I'm just really interested in your approach and how you think, as the body of data scientists, as it grows, how can we become more responsible about managing this? And are there any really true solutions that we can potentially see for the future in dealing with this?
Yeah, I think
that's a bit of a mouthful.
That's a huge question. It's so important, and it's a huge question, and I don't know that I have the answer, but there's a couple of ways that I try to approach it. I think that one of the easiest ways to try to approach that is to add some of these features into the model so that you can account for bias. So for example, trying to add gender or race or interactions between those terms. You should be able to see what that does to the model and what it does with your independent and dependent variables. And another thing that I think of is really important is validating the model on different data sets. So I think that, one of the things that I think about immediately when you say that is, self-driving cars and, and not working for people of color, because sometimes, you know, we're brown skin or we're darker skin, and at nighttime it's difficult to see us and it's hard to discern. And the algorithm is like, oh, the gradient's not, you know, the percent change between the gradient is not high enough for us to recognize that that individual is there or something like that. And so I think that it's important to keep validating your model and tweaking it for data sets that include everyone. And I think the difficulty there is that you have to gather that data and you have to be motivated to do so. And so in these high pressure situations where you have a model that needs to perform and you have these people who are in positions of power who are asking you to what's the output, and you don't have an answer, or you do have an answer and it works for 70% of the population and it doesn't work for a small population, it's like making that decision, adding in your ethics, and making that decision and saying like, yes, it doesn't work. Yes, it works for this large population, but I think it's important enough that we are going to include this data set and test on this data set until we get it right.
Right. So, I mean, you've actually created a product that fits a particular part of the market that, if we look through history, hasn't always been catered to. That is the beauty industry, specifically for Black, brown skin. And I remember it wasn't until, I believe, Rihanna came out with Fenty that for the first time a makeup company produced, you know, foundation across the entire spectrum of women. And I don't think it was just for women of color. She did everyone. She included everyone, which was, it's like, for that to only happen in this sort of like decade is just, you know, it's mind blowing. So I'm really curious. I know it sounds like, I mean, that shouldn't have been too difficult to accomplish, but it makes me want to dig deeper as to why isn't it happening, and really brings me back to Bell 51. You know, what were the drivers behind you, you know, approaching that, and why do you think that we are not seeing, or we haven't seen as many, and what can we potentially do to change that if we understand why that's happening?
Yeah. So I think I touched on it slightly in the beginning when I was talking about what made me want to start the company, but I didn't really get into the specifics of it. So I was in Sephora with a friend of mine who was of a lighter skin tone. And we were in, you know, looking for hair removal devices. It was summertime, and this was about 6 or 7 years ago. And we both tried it. They have like a kind of like a skin chart. And I don't know if everyone's familiar, but there used to be a paper bag test that was used for brown people, basically Black people, for, you know, decades. And also there was a pencil test, but the pencil test was for your hair. If it was too kinky, if the pencil didn't fall out your hair, then you wouldn't pass that test. And if you were darker than a paper brown bag, then you wouldn't pass that test. And that's kind of what it reminded me of when I went into the store and had to hold my skin up to this thing, and like I couldn't pass the paper bag test, so I can't use these products. And I was like, well, why is there no other product here that actually solves this problem? Like, we're not in the 1930s. Like, why is this the case? So, I mean, but I was patient. I waited years for someone to do something about it. Because even though my specialty is data science, and like I did have a background in biomedical engineering, I'm not a physicist, so I'm not really like into lasers.
Right.
I was not into lasers as much. And so I was like, well, I'll just wait for someone to fix this. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one did it. So it's like the comfort that I have with science is that, like I said, I understand the basics. I understand enough of everything that I was like, you know what? I don't have to wait. And I'm going to try to get this product made by people who are really smart and really understand the physics behind it and why. It turns out, I don't want to speak too soon, but it turns out that and our product's going to be hopefully getting its FDA clearance soon, and patent pending. But it turns out that it's not as difficult as I thought it was.
Right.
It's just nobody wanted to do it, right. Which is crazy. Like, it's like, okay, so I think the need has to be there. The market, the trust from the people funding these endeavors has to be there. So that's like one thing, is the money.
Right.
The businesses and the trust they have in the market. And then another thing is that you have to test on people. And I think traditionally communities of color don't trust like these volunteer programs, like, oh, let's test coronavirus vaccine on, you know, these populations or things like that. So communities of colors are really, really nervous about just volunteering to test things, period. So I think that it's hard, you know, if you're gathering a subject pool or gathering, you know, people to test this new product on, there's not going to be but maybe one or two Black or brown people in the group. And if that's your data set and it doesn't work on the one or two people,
that's it.
They're going to throw it away because now it works perfectly and now you can go to market. So I think that encouraging us to be more vocal, I think that showing them, I think we've shown them that our money matters and that they've been putting more effort into that and trying to, you know, have people of color who are in positions of power so that they bring these things to light. Comes to mind, Bevel comes to mind. He had to, it's a company where they created this shaving razor specifically to stop ingrown hairs for communities of color, or even people with curlier hair, which tends to be communities of color, and it causes ingrowns. They created a razor for that, but they had to convince all of the venture capitalists to invest in them, which they had a really hard time doing because they didn't see it as a problem. So it's like, there's just so many issues and so many institutional biases and, you know, things behind it. But I think getting people into positions of power who understand that these things are important is probably the best way to challenge that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are the most sort of data or tech-driven enhancements that make your specific products at Bell 51 really special for the market right now?
Well, I mean, we are the only company that's tech-centered. So there are a lot of great products out there that are topical. And like I said, that traditionally communities of color don't trust technology, especially like new technology, because of the things that have happened to us in the past. So I think that, you know, we are in a unique position to be the first company that is focused on communities of color and introducing them to technologies that work on their skin. And then we're also committed to creating those technologies. So it's like, I'm not even just like curating it, I'm also building it. Like I'm taking the money, whatever profits it is that I make from the company, and putting it back into the community and trying to build products that work specifically for us.
So this whole entrepreneurship journey for you, what would you say have been your most sort of challenging points or your biggest rejections even? And how have you overcome them?
I think so it's going to sound cliche, but one of my biggest or most difficult rejections and failures was like all self-created. Mm-hmm. So I think, I mean, I decided, so I've had a startup before in my past, and I, you know, sought funding and, you know, wanted to go through like the Silicon Valley pathway, and was driving to San Francisco from LA and pitching and doing all of that. And I mean, I had luck with people who might have been interested or were interested with more traction. You know, no one was just giving me money like how they do for other cultures and just saying like, hey, just go build it. And then, you know, we trust you. So I would have had to come with it like fully prepared. And I just had like the basics done. I had built an app, and I was like pitching the app that I built without the people on it. I was just pitching the app for like angel investors and VCs. So at that point, you know, I was like looking for funding, but at this point I knew that I was just I was going to skip that. I was going to try to build it myself, and everything from the ground up with no extra capital from anybody else. I was just going to try to bootstrap it. And so the biggest like rejection and failures that I've had have all been me just not believing in myself. Like if my lowest sales were just me like not investing enough in my marketing or not enough time, or because I'm like, there's a little bit of self-doubt there, because I'm like, well, what if people don't really want this? What if it's just me and that kind of thing? And so I think, you know, learning to trust myself and learning to you know, I guess like just trust the process has been very like instrumental in learning. But yeah, all of my failures have come from me, just like not believing in myself.
No, that's very insightful. So, I mean, hearing you speak, what would you say drives you as an entrepreneur? What is like your end goal? What are you hoping to achieve, and what keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have So we also have a partnership with estheticians of color, or estheticians who serve people of color. And this partnership goes two ways. They use our products to help with their endeavors, and then also we get feedback from them about the next and newest emerging technology that they'd love to see in their pockets. And it's easier for them to get if we can get them to be more cost efficient. So these products that I'm building are usually traditionally $30,000, $40,000 in dermatologist office. And so we're trying to get them down to scale where it's something that is offerable to everyone. And so we're making it, we're trying to basically build some kind of equity here, where everybody will be in the same kind of bucket. So an example is talking to an esthetician. She said, I worked in a dermatologist's office for many years. And, we have this specific laser that works really well, but we have to use it at the lowest setting for people who are brown because we don't want to burn them. And so with that, they have to have more treatments. And I asked them, the dermatologist specifically, if I could charge them less because their skin color would make it so that they would have to have, 15, 20 treatments versus 2 or 3 treatments. And this dermatologist said no.
Wow.
So these are the things that we're dealing with, is that like people are being charged, the same for less. And it's just like, my goal is that, I would build out a company where we will kind of even the playing field there. And I mean, it could be bigger than I could ever dream. But at this point, I'm just trying to like build product by product and, help where I can. And, I'm not trying to take over the world. I'm just trying to, make it so that people can get the trends that are popular, the things that people want to get, that brown people can get it too, and Black people can get it too. So
that's amazing, truly. If someone wanted to pursue a path similar to yours in the sense of they want to be more than sort of one sort of bucket, maybe they want to do a PhD and they want to be a data scientist, or they want to be an entrepreneur and a data scientist, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I would say start early. Like there's no reason to stop yourself to stop yourself thinking that you're not prepared because you don't have specific qualifications. Mm-hmm. You can dive into anything. I taught myself Python. I taught myself R. You don't have to have, like, I went on later on to take courses in these things and these specific coding languages, but you don't need to do that. You can teach yourself. So I think that, one of the biggest, some big advice that I would give to people is to start early and to start.
Yeah, that's great advice. Who or what would you say have been the most sort of influential, either books or ideas or people that have crossed your path?
I mean, a book that I thought was really, really important, and I'm trying to think of the author now, but it was a book called Measure What Matters. And it was really instrumental because it helps you to kind of understand how to operationalize things and think differently. And it's something you need for data science, because, people will throw at you, we need a happiness metric and we want to change that over whatever time frame with our customer base, and you have to create that from scratch, and you have to be creative. And I think there's a lot of creativity to data science that people don't talk about.
Right.
The How to Win Friends and Influence People book by Dale Carnegie. Yeah. Very, very instrumental. It's so simple, but it's just something that, helps you to remember, basically how to become a more influential and people person. And I'm trying to think of anything else, but I think those are, as far as people go, every day I get inspired by different people, because when you realize how many millionaires and billionaires and 100,000-aires there are in the world that are, like, there's just so much money out there. There's so many different ways to be successful that all you have to do is try. And so, like, every time I see somebody, I'm like inspired, like, yeah, like I can do this. Like, there's so many people who are making lots of money out here. So I don't know. I mean, individuals, there are obviously like Michelle Obama and lots of those like great, but I think every day that you can see somebody who is really inspiring.
Absolutely. What are the best sort of resources that you use or tools? And it can be across the board, across anything really, that really help you.
So one thing is, so Columbia has, before I even was attending their university officially, I was taking, and they don't even actually know I did this because I was taking their online courses. So it's through edX.
Oh,
You
yes.
could, yeah, I just was taking their courses to brush up on a lot of the principles. I think that people should also use like community colleges. I brushed up on my linear. I hadn't seen linear algebra since since maybe like 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. And I decided to brush up on my linear algebra, and I just retook the course at a community college. So it's just take advantage of the things that are free or low cost around you so that you can improve upon your skills. It's always great to refresh your statistics, things like that. Those are the things that really have helped me. And, obviously there's like Stack Overflow and all types of things like that where you can go for solutions when you're stuck. But just like digging in, and there's so many free software. Python, PyCharm is free. RStudio is free. R is free. Wow. Just download it and set it up and then try something.
Absolutely. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Lisa. Where can our listeners connect with you online and find you?
So our Instagram is Bell51Co. And then our Facebook, it's a private group, but we can add you if you just want to be added. It's Bell51. And then I can also be emailed at lisa@bell51.com. And we have a website, which is www.bell51.com.
That's awesome. I will link all of that below in the description as well. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Lisa. Thanks once again.
Thank you.